Section 22 of The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Dream of the Red Chamber, Book 2 by Xueqin, translated by Henry Bancroft Joly, Chapter 36, Part 1. While Xueqin is busy embroidering mandarin ducks, Baoyu receives in the Jiangyun Pavilion an omen from a dream. Baoyu apprehends that there is a destiny in affections when his feelings are aroused to a sense of the situation in the pear fragrance court. Ever since Dowager Lady Jia's return from Madame Wang's quarters, for we will now take up the string of our narrative, she naturally felt happier in her mind as she saw that Baoyu improved from day to day. But nervous lest Jia Zheng should again in the future send for him, she lost no time in bidding a servant summon a head page, a constant attendant upon Jia Zheng, to come to her, and in impressing upon him various orders. Should, she enjoined him, anything turn up henceforward connected with meeting guests, entertaining visitors, and other such matters, and your master mean to send for Baoyu, you can dispense with going to deliver the message. Just you tell him that I say that after the severe thrashing he has had, great care must be first taken of him during several months before he can be allowed to walk, and that, secondly, his constellation is unpropitious, and that he could not see any outsider, while sacrifices are being offered to the stars, that I won't have him, therefore, put his foot beyond the second gate before the expiry of the 8th moon. The head page listened patiently to her instructions, and, assenting to all she had to say, he took his leave. Old Lady Jia thereupon also sent for Nurse Li, Xueqin, and the other waiting maids, and recommended them to tell Baoyu about her injunctions so that he might be able to quiet his mind. Baoyu had always had a repugnance for entertaining high officials and men in general, and the greatest horror of going in official hat and ceremonial dress to offer congratulations or express condolences, to pay calls, return visits, or perform other similar conventionalities. But upon receipt on the present occasion of this message, he became so much the more confirmed in his dislikes that not only did he suspend all intercourse with every single relative and friend, but even went so far as to study more than he had ever done before his own caprices in the fulfillment of those morning and evening salutations due to the senior members of his family. Day after day he spent in the garden, doing nothing else than loafing about, sitting down here or reclining there. Of a morning he would, as soon as it was day, stroll as far as the quarters of Dowager Lady Jia and Madame Wang, to repair back, however, in no time. Yet ever ready was he every day that went by to perform menial services for any of the waiting maids. He, in fact, wasted away in the most complete dolce far niente days as well as months. If perchance Baochai or any other girl of the same age as herself found at any time an opportunity to give him advice, he would, instead of taking it in good part, fly into a huff. A pure and spotless maiden, he would say, has likewise gone and deliberately imitated those persons, whose aim is to fish for reputation and to seek praise. That set of government thieves and salaried devils. This result entirely arises from the fact that there have been people in former times who have uselessly stirred up trouble and purposely fabricated stories with the primary object of enticing the filthy male creatures, who will spring up in future ages to follow in their steps. And who would have thought it? I have had the misfortune of being born a masculine being. But even those beautiful girls in the female apartments have been so contaminated by this practice that rarely they show themselves ungrateful for the verge of heaven and earth, in endowing them with perception, and in rearing them with so much comeliness. Seeing therefore what an insane mania possessed him, not one of his cousins came forward to tender him one proper word of counsel. Lin Daiyu was the only one of them who, from his very infancy, had never once admonished him to strive and make a position and attain fame. So thus it was that he entertained for Daiyu profound consideration. But enough of minor details. We will now turn our attention to Lady Feng. Soon after the news of Jin Chuner's death reached her, she saw that domestics from various branches of the family paid her frequent visits at most unexpected hours, and presented her a lot of things, and that they courted her presence at most unseasonable moments, to pay their compliments and adulate her, and she began to harbor suspicions in her own mind, as she little knew what their object could possibly be. On this date, she again noticed that some of them had brought their gifts, so when evening arrived, and no one was present, she felt compelled to inquire jocosely of Ping Er what their aim could be. "Can't your ladyship fathom even this?" Ping Er answered with a sardonic smile. "Why, their daughters must, I fancy, be servant girls in Madame Wang's apartments. For her ladyship's room, 4 elderly girls are at present allotted with a monthly allowance of 1 tael. The rest simply receiving several hundreds of cash each month. So now that Jin Chuner is dead and gone, these people must, of course, be anxious to try their tricks and get this 1 tael job." Hearing this, Lady Feng smiled a significant smile. "That's it. Yes, that's it," she exclaimed. "You have really suggested the idea to my mind. From all appearances, these people are a most insatiable lot, for they make quite enough in the way of money. And as for any business that requires a little exertion, why, they are never ready to bear a share of it. They make use of their girls as so many tools to show their own duties upon. Yet one overlooks that. But must they too have designs upon this job? Never mind. These people cannot easily afford to spend upon me the money they do, but they bring this upon their own selves, so I will keep every bit of thing they send. I've, after all, resolved how to act in the matter." Having arrived at this decision, Lady Feng purely and simply protracted the delay until all the women had sent her enough to satisfy her, when she at last suited her own convenience and spoke to Madame Wang on the subject of the vacant posts. Mrs. Xue and her daughter were sitting one day at noon in Madame Wang's quarters, together with Lin Daiyu and the other girls, when Lady Feng found an opportunity and broached the topic with Madame Wang. "Ever since," she said, "Sister Jin Chuner's death, there has been 1 servant less in your ladyship's service. But you may possibly have set your choice upon some girl. If so, do let me know who it is, so that I may be able to pay her her monthly wages." This reminder made Madame Wang commune with her own self. "I fancy," she remarked, "that the custom is that there should be 4 or 5 of them, but as long as there are enough to wait upon me, I don't mind. So we can really dispense with another." "What you say is, properly speaking, perfectly correct," smiled Lady Feng. "But it's an old established custom. There are still a couple to be found in other people's rooms, and won't you, madam, conform with the rule? Besides, the saving of a tael is a small matter." After this argument, Madame Wang indulged in further thought. "Never mind," she then observed. "Just you bring over this allowance and pay it to me, and there will be no need to supply another girl." I'll hand over this tale to her younger sister, Yu Chun'er, and finish with it. Her elder sister came to an unpleasant end after a long term of service with me, so if the younger sister, she leaves behind in my employ, receives a double share, it won't be any too excessive. Lady Feng expressed her approval, and turning round she said smilingly to Yu Chun'er, "I congratulate you. I congratulate you." Yu Chun'er thereupon crossed over and prostrated herself. "I just want to ask you," Madame Wang went on to inquire, "how much Mrs. Zhao and Mrs. Zhou are allowed monthly?" "They have a fixed allowance," answered Lady Feng. "Each of them draws 2 taels, but Mrs. Zhao gets 2 taels for cousin Jia Huang, so hers amounts in all to 4 taels. Besides these 4 strings of cash." "Are they paid in full, month after month?" Madame Wang inquired. Lady Feng thought the question so very strange that she hastened to exclaim by way of reply, "How are they not paid in full?" "The other day," Madame Wang proceeded, "I heard a faint rumor that there was someone who complained in an aggrieved way that she had got a string short. How and why is this?" "The monthly allowances of the servant girls attached to the secondary wives," Lady Feng hurriedly added with a smile, "amounted originally to a dao each. But ever since last year, it was decided by those people outside that the shares of each of those ladies' girls should be reduced by half. That is, each to 500 cash. And as each lady has a couple of servant girls, they receive therefore a dao short. But for this they can't bear me a grudge. As far as I am concerned, I would be too glad to let them have it, but our people outside will again disallow it. So is it likely that I can authorize any increase? Pray, in this matter of payments, I merely receive the money, and I have nothing to do with how it comes and how it goes. I nevertheless recommended on 2 or 3 occasions that it would be better if these 2 shares were again raised to the old amount. But they said there's only that much money, so that I can't very well volunteer any further suggestions. Now that the funds are paid into my hands, I give them to them every month without any irregularity of even so much as a day. When payments hitherto were effected outside, what month were they not short of money? And did they ever, on any single instance, obtain their pay at the proper time and date?" Having heard this explanation, Madame Wang kept silent for a while. Next, she proceeded to ask how many girls there were with Dowager Lady Jia drawing 1 tael. "8 of them," rejoined Lady Feng, "but there are at present only 7. The other one is Xueqin." "Quite right," assented Madame Wang, "but your cousin Baoyu hasn't any maid at 1 tael, for Xueqin is still a servant belonging to old Lady Jia's household." "Xueqin," Lady Feng smiled, "is still our dear ancestor's servant. She's only lent to cousin Baoyu, so that she still receives this tael in her capacity of maid to our worthy senior. Any proposal, therefore, that might now be made that this tael should, as Xueqin is Baoyu's servant, be curtailed, can on no account be entertained. Yet, were it suggested that another servant should be added to our senior's staff, then in this way one could reduce the tael she gets. But if this be not curtailed, it will be necessary to also add a servant in cousin Jia Huang's rooms, in order that there should be a fair apportionment. In fact, Qing Wen, Xie Yue, and the others, numbering 7 senior maids, receive each a dao a month, and Jia Hui and the rest of the junior maids, 8 in all, get each 500 cash per mensem, and this was recommended by our venerable ancestor herself. So how can anyone be angry and feel displeasure?" "Just listen," laughed Mrs. Xue, "to that girl Feng's mouth. It rattles and rattles like a cart laden with walnuts, which has turned topsy-turvy. Yet her accounts are, from what one can gather, clear enough, and her arguments full of reason. "Aunt," rejoined Lady Feng, smiling, "was I likely, pray, wrong in what I said?" "Whoever said you were wrong?" Mrs. Xue smiled. "But were you to talk a little slower, wouldn't it be a saving of exertion for you?" Lady Feng was about to laugh, but hastily checking herself, she lent an ear to what Madame Wang might have to tell her. Madame Wang indulged in thought for a considerable time. Afterwards, facing Lady Feng, "You'd better," she said, "select a waiting maid tomorrow and send her over to our worthy senior to fill up Zheren's place. Then discontinue that allowance which Zheren draws, and keep out of the sum of 20 taels allotted to me monthly, 2 taels and a dao, and give them to Zheren. So henceforward, what Mrs. Zhao and Mrs. Zhou will get, Zheren will likewise get, with the only difference that the share granted to Zheren will be entirely apportioned out of my own allowance. Mine, therefore, there will be no necessity to touch the public funds." Lady Feng acquiesced to each one of her recommendations, and pushing Mrs. Xue, "Aunt," she inquired, "have you heard her proposal? What have I all along maintained?" "Well, my words have actually come out true today." "This should have been accomplished long ago," Mrs. Xue answered, "for without, of course, making any allusion to her looks, her way of doing business is liberal. Her speech and her relations with people are always prompted by an even temper, while inwardly she has plenty of singleness of heart and eagerness to hold her own. Indeed, such a girl is not easy to come across." Madame Wang made every effort to conceal her tears. "How could you people ever rightly estimate Zheren's qualities?" she observed. "Why, she's 100 times better than my own Baoyu. How fortunate, in reality, Baoyu is! Well, would it be if he could have her wait upon him for the whole length of his life?" "In that case," Lady Feng suggested, "why, have her face shaved at once, and openly place her in his room as a secondary wife? Won't this be a good plan?" "This won't do," Madame Wang retorted. "For first and foremost, he is of tender years. In the second place, my husband won't countenance any such thing. In the third, so long as Baoyu sees that Zheren is his waiting maid, he may, in the event of anything occurring from his having been allowed to run wild, listen to any good counsel she might give him. But were she now to be made his secondary wife, Zheren would not venture to tender him any extreme advice, even when it's necessary to do so. It's better, therefore, to let things stand as they are for the present, and talk about them again after the lapse of another 2 or 3 years." At the close of these arguments, Lady Feng could not put in a word, by way of reply, to refute them. So turning round, she left the room. She had no sooner, however, got under the veranda than she discerned the wives of a number of butlers waiting for her to report various matters to her. Seeing her issue out of the room, they with one consent smiled. "What has your ladyship had to lay before Madame Wang?" they remarked, "that you have been talking away this length of time? Didn't you find it hot work?" Lady Feng tucked up her sleeves several times, then resting her foot on the step of the side door, she laughed and rejoined, "The draught in this passage is so cool that I'll stop and let it play on me a bit before I go on. You people," she proceeded to tell them, "say that I've been talking to her all this while, but Madame Wang conjured up all that has occurred for the last 200 years and questioned me about it. So could I very well not have anything to say in reply? But from this day forth," she added with a sarcastic smile, "I shall do several mean things. And should even Mrs. Zhao and Mrs. Zhou go out of any ill will and tell Madame Wang, I won't know what fear is for such stupid, glib-tongued, foul-mouthed creatures as they, who are bound not to see a good end. It isn't for them to indulge in those fanciful dreams of becoming primary wives, for there will come soon a day when the whole lump sum of their allowance will be cut off. They grumble against us for having now reduced the perquisites of the servant maids, but they don't consider whether they deserve to have so many as 3 girls to dance attendance on them. While heaping abuse on their heads, she started homewards, and went all alone in search of some domestic to go and deliver a message to old Lady Jia. But without any further reference to her, we will take up the thread of our narrative with Mrs. Xue and the others along with her. During this interval, they finished feasting on melons. After some more gossip, each went her own way, and Baochai, Daiyu, and the rest of the cousins returned into the garden. Baochai then asked Daiyu to repair with her to the Ouxiang arbor, but Daiyu said that she was just going to have her bath. So they parted company, and Baochai walked back all by herself. On her way, she stepped into the Yihongyuan to look up Baoyu and have a friendly hobnob with him, with the idea of dispelling her midday lassitude. But contrary to her expectations, the moment she put her foot into the court, she did not so much as catch the call of a crow. Even the 2 storks stood under the banana trees, plunged in sleep. Baochai proceeded along the covered passage and entered the rooms. Here she discovered the 7 girls sleeping soundly on the bed of the outer apartment, some lying one way, some another. So turning round the decorated screen, she wended her steps into Baoyu's chamber. Baoyu was asleep in bed. Jueran was seated by his side, busy plying her needle. Next to her lay a yak tail. Baochai advanced up to her. You're really far too scrupulous, she said smilingly in an undertone. Are there still flies or mosquitoes in here? And why do you yet use that fly flap for? To drive what away? Jueran was quite taken by surprise, but hastily raising her head and realizing that it was Baochai, she hurriedly put down her needlework. Miss, she whispered with a smile, you came upon me so unawares that you gave me quite a start. You don't know, miss, that though there be no flies or mosquitoes there is, no one would believe it, a kind of small insect, which penetrates through the holes of these gourds. It is scarcely to be detected, but when one is asleep, it bites just like ants do. It isn't to be wondered at, Baochai suggested, for the back of these rooms adjoins the water. The whole place is also one mass of fragrant flowers, and the interior of this room is, too, full of their aroma. These insects grow mostly in the core of flowers, so no sooner do they scent the smell of any than they at once rush in. Saying this, she cast a look on the needlework she, that is, Jueran, held in her hands. It consisted, in fact, of a belt of white silk, lined with red and embroidered on the upper part with designs representing mandarin ducks, disporting themselves among some lotus. The lotus flowers were red, the leaves green, the ducks of variegated colors. "Ai ya!" ejaculated Baochai. "What very beautiful work! For whom is this, that is worth your while wasting so much labor on it?" Jueran pouted her lips towards the bed. "Does a big, strapping fellow like this," Baochai laughed, "still wear such things?" "He would never wear any before," Jueran smiled. "That's why such a nice one was specially worked for him." in order that when he was allowed to see it, he should not be able to do otherwise than use it. With the present hot weather, he goes to sleep anyhow, but as he has been caused to wear it, it doesn't matter if even he doesn't cover himself well at night. You say that I bestow much labor upon this, but you haven't yet seen the one he has on. It is a lucky thing, Baochai observed, smiling, that you are gifted with such patience. I've done so much of it today, remarked Xueqin, that my neck is quite sore from bending over it. My dear miss, she then urged with a beaming countenance, do sit here a little. I will go out for a turn. I'll be back shortly. With these words, she sallied out of the room. End of section 22.